Good evening, everybody. Our national security, the soundness of our dollar, the wealth we create for generations of Americans, the sovereignty of our nation, all at risk in the high-level trade talks now going on between the United States and China in Washington. And none of it, frankly, looks good for the good guys. From the talks come word that there are principled agreements, as they're called, principled agreements between the two delegations. No word on what has been agreed to, in principle or otherwise. There are also memoranda of understanding, 6 of those, and it hardly matters what they contain, because there's nothing binding, nothing enforceable in any memorandum of understanding at any time. And how do we know all of this? How can I report this to you tonight? Well, not because I've heard it from the U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer or any of his delegation, not because I've heard it from the White House Communications Director Bill Shine, no, because our inside reporting relies entirely on the Chinese side. The Chinese Foreign Ministry is our correspondent, Edward Lawrence's principal source. Mom's the word of the day at the White House on these trade talks, leaving the field entirely to the Chinese. The White House seems content, for at least today, to allow China to control the messaging on trade, assisting only the powerful influence campaign of the globalist elites, the radical Dems, Rhino Republicans, Wall Street, the Business Roundtable, the Chamber of Commerce, and of course the Koch brothers, in their drumbeat of demands that President Trump do a trade deal, no matter how much it favors the Chinese, no matter how much pain it causes American workers and small businessmen and women. Do a deal, they say. Any deal. But this time, the art of the deal means President Trump either makes America great again, puts America and Americans first, or the Chinese prevail and dominate. All that stands between China and global domination is in fact one man, one president. While those talks go on in Washington, Chinese state-run tech giant Huawei is expanding its influence in North America, adding 200 employees in Canada, taking a primary position in building Germany's 5G network, offering emerging nations technology that is advanced and is much cheaper, no matter the security threat Huawei and China poses. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo today warned nations about the existential threat posed by Huawei, its technology, and its Chinese communist masters.
We've been out around the world just making sure everybody had the same information, that countries understand the risk of putting this Huawei technology into their IT systems. We can't forget these systems were designed by with the express work alongside the Chinese PLA, their military in China. They are creating a real risk for these countries and their systems, the security of their people. Europeans care deeply about their privacy. The risk to privacy from this technology is very, very real.
We take it all up tonight. The Hudson Institute's Michael Pillsbury joins us, retired 4-star General Jack Keane, former Reagan White House political director, Republican strategist and savant Ed Rollins, among our guests here tonight. Fired former FBI acting director Andrew McCabe's confessions are unending, and so too his constant contradictions. Former House Oversight Committee Chair Jason Chaffetz joins us here tonight to take those up and much more. We'll tell you about Empire actor Jussie Smollett, who's now in big trouble, as he should be. Today, he turned himself in to police in Chicago, where he faces a felony charge for filing a false police report. Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson slammed the media, Hollywood elites, and the liberal politicians who were so quick to believe, to stand behind his fraud and spread the evil of Smollett's lies and hoax.
This announcement today recognizes that Empire actor Jussie Smollett took advantage of the pain and anger of racism to promote his career. The accusations within this phony attack received national attention for weeks. Celebrities, news commentators, and even presidential candidates weighed in on something that was choreographed by an actor.
And so we begin. Our top story tonight. There has never been a more powerful influence campaign directed at any president of the United States than the one now underway on the issue of trade between America and China. The messaging is led by media, business, political elites, and most powerfully, the Chinese government itself. For now, at least, China has the loudest voice in our public arena. Edward Lawrence has been following the talks throughout today's trade session. He has the latest for us tonight from Washington. Ed?
Well, Lou, both the Chinese and U.S. trade delegations met at the U.S. Trade Representative's office to try and work out these agreements. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson says that they have an agreement on principle on major issues, some major issues. They would not say exactly what those issues were. A U.S. Trade Representative, Robert Lighthizer, says he wants specific enforcement actions written into these agreements. Reuters says there are 6 different agreements that tackle each specific concern by the United States. One major concern, the forced transfer of technology and protecting companies' intellectual property. Now, the U.S. delegation wants China to change the laws so they can't steal patent information going forward submitted by U.S. companies. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says that this is one of the president's major issues.
This enormous transfer, this unlawful transfer of American wealth, American innovation and creativity that's taken place over the last decades is enormous. It's historic. The Trump administration is determined to push back against it.
Specific enforcement will be written into any memorandum of understanding, according to the U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer. Still, China experts say that if the U.S. moves on the March 1st deadline without an agreement, then nothing will change.
Well, we've tried this approach before, taking a hard line. It hasn't worked. The problem is, when we talk to the Chinese, they think that we want to engage them, and you have all sorts of expectations on their side. They need to see a new attitude on the part of Washington.
Both sides have said that President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping need to meet face-to-face in order to finally settle this agreement. The Chinese have blocked on their calendar March 26th through March 29th. Lou?
Ed, thank you very much. Ed Lawrence reporting. Joining us tonight is Dr. Michael Pillsbury. He's director of the Center for Chinese Strategy at the Hudson Institute, author, and trade advisor to the Trump administration, and it is great to have you with us. Michael, let's turn to what is going on. The Chinese today really have the field to themselves. The White House not talking, the Communications Department, the Trade Representative, and the Trade Ministry of China, with 30 members in the delegation outnumbering the U.S. Members better than 2 to 1. I mean, they really are dominating in every way right now, whether it's messaging or whether it is in the number of folks at the table.
Well, it's true, Lou. The Chinese are trying hard to control the narrative. But don't forget, even in their own press coverage, they think America has a secret weapon, and his name is Donald Trump. They often point out how many presidents they've been able to bamboozle, frankly, to use a polite word, over the last 30 years or more. They don't see Donald Trump the same way. They see him as a master negotiator. There's translations of his Art of the Deal, and they know he brought this to office. He first wrote about this in the year 2000.
You're making me feel, Michael, like we didn't have an election in 2016. I even voted for the man. So you needn't persuade me, and there are likely many.
I'm going to outpraise him.
Well, no, the praise is
but I'm telling you
worthy of it. But I think there are other issues we need to get to.
This is what the Chinese think. Important thing is this is what the Chinese think about him. So they're on the defensive.
They may be on the defensive, but right now we've got 2 members of the delegation. They are Steve Mnuchin and Larry Kudlow. Who are not exactly the most notorious fair traders. They do not grasp, it seems to me at least, from this comfortable distance I have from the nation's capital, the importance of deficits, their impact on our economy, and the necessity of prevailing. As a matter of fact, they seem both determined to take any deal, any way they can, despite some smooth, soothing words they utter from time to time to the left-wing media. Your thoughts?
My thought is that Larry and Steve have a different worldview than the president, but the president is capable of hearing their point of view, welcoming the fundraising skills of Steve Mnuchin. He was a major fundraiser during the campaign, but he can understand the difference.
A different matter, but all right.
I did enjoy Peter Navarro talking about the stench of Goldman Sachs in Peter's speech in November.
And unregistered foreign agents.
That too.
We could name names, couldn't we?
But let's give the president some credit. He wants a debate
Well,
to
now,
take
wait a minute.
place in front of him.
One minute you want to praise him, and then you find him in deficit for credit. He's never either on this broadcast, never short of praise,
I think the Chinese see him as tariff man. They've translated that into China and into their press. Tariff man. They're afraid he's going to put the tariffs back on.
I understand the importance of understanding the enemy. I also understand the importance of disregarding Sinocentrism, if you will.
Right.
Just because they happen to be at the table doesn't, to me, in any way garnish the serving. We are talking about this nation reversing decades. This president is the only one. Think about this. The only one leading any Western nation who has stood up against the Chinese and said, in the deficits, in the external debt that is rising uncontrollably,
the theft,
and stop the intellectual property and technology theft that you seem to think is a birthright that is that of the PLA. I mean, it's madness. And then the United States turns to China and says, as part of a trade deal, we're going to ask you not to steal from us. A bank doesn't say don't steal from us. They put up armed guards. They put up ways in which to stop you if you wish to rob them. They don't say, please sign this, dear bank robber, that you won't try again. This is madness, is it not?
I think we can place a bet of $1,000, Lou, between you and me. Mm-hmm. I think the president's going to insist on an enforcement mechanism. This is not going to be the end of the story. The China theft story and the trade lack of reciprocity.
It's not going to be the end of the story?
It's going to go on for our lifetimes, Lou. But the president's going to he's going to score some points in these talks.
But he can't rip the whole thing up. You are the Chinese expert. So, but
you are too. I hereby appoint you a China expert too.
I wish it were so easy as to be anointed, appointed, etc.
I'll teach you some more Mandarin.
But I'm more interested in plain-spoken English, and I am more interested in no more long war doctrine, as we heard when it came to counterinsurgency and fighting the war on terror.
Yes.
I'm no more interested in that than, for example, saying that this is going to be a generational war. If it's a generational war, we lose, and you know that, because of the sheer weight of the Chinese state.
It's a 100-year marathon.
Yes, it's a 100-year marathon, and it's a title for a book I think we ought to think about. But here's
70 years
fact.
Are already
the fact is we don't have 100 years. We have now. And the threat is extant, and it's existential. And we need to respond to it. This president is doing so. I worry, and worry deeply, that he does not have a sufficient voice amongst those who are there to serve him and the nation. They have shortcuts and other interests that they seem to find preeminent rather than that of the president's values and policies.
If you go back and read the president's book in the year 2000, you'll find he already identifies China as the main challenge to the future of the United States.
You and I are having trouble communicating. And I think one of the reasons is you seem to think you need to defend the president. I think we need to defend the reality and the threats and the issues that are on the table. And the issues on the table are memoranda of understanding. And you and
Yes.
I both know that in any business, in any walk of life, and in politics or government, that an MOU isn't worth the paper it's written on. It's unenforceable. It's certainly not binding in any fashion. We know that we have to stop theft. Hundreds of billions of dollars in theft. There has to be not just a discussion about vis-a-vis the Chinese. It has to be, what in hell will we do to protect our cyberspace? What will we do to protect our cyber assets? And that, by the way, includes our intellectual property as well as technology.
Yes.
What is the answer to those questions?
Well, the answer is the framework is much broader than U.S.-China trade talks. I think the president's got a more comprehensive strategy in mind. Sometimes he calls it the Indo-Pacific strategy. There's a cyber offensive component to it. It's really across the board competition.
No danger then no danger then that anything will be signed or come of these sham talks that are going on right now in Washington, D.C.
No, I didn't say that.
That's what I was asking, though.
I think the Chinese want to control the narrative.
Yeah.
They're up against the toughest
They want to
president
control
in
the damn
history.
world.
That's the book called 100-Year Marathon. They're on the way to doing
I
it.
stepped right into that. We have to conclude. Always good to talk with you, Michael.
I love your books, Lou.
Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Michael Pillsbury. We recommend his book to you highly. 100 years. 100 years. We're going to shorten that.
70 years gone already.
There you go. Still
Thanks.
ahead tonight. Good to have you with us. The left-wing national media's complicity in Jussie Smollett's fake hate crime and how it exposes their not-so-subtle liberal bias. Ooh.
If there are any independent voices out there, if there are any journalists who are not beating the same drum and giving the same talking points, then we pay the price.
The left pays the price. But so far, it's an orthodoxy that seems intent on surviving. Drat the luck. We'll have more on that later. Jason Chaffetz joins us. Up next, Speaker Pelosi. Well, she's rounding up her band of radical Dems trying to dismantle the president's national emergency. And by the way, she wouldn't mind dismantling the entire Trump agenda. Ed Rollins with me right after the break. Oh, yes, and it's about 2020 already. Stay with us. We'll be right back. One of our favorite people here, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, encouraging members of her Congress to support a resolution that would block President Trump's national emergency declaration. Congressman Joaquin Castro of Texas will introduce the resolution, we're told, reliably tomorrow. So far, just 200 members have signed on as co-sponsors. I'm starting to think there's a partisan divide here, aren't you? Well, no Republicans so far are supporting the legislation, but Rhino Senator Susan Collins, bless her heart, she says she will if it were a clean resolution when it reaches the Senate. Now, there's a tough bargain. Senator Collins arguing there are times an emergency declaration makes sense, but this isn't one of them. She didn't exactly explain what that meant. When would you have a declaration of national emergency other than when there is, for example, a national emergency? The good senator says the president should instead work with Congress. You know what a fun thing that's going to be. The same Congress that's made up of mostly Democrats and have just passed a resolution to deny him his declaration. So, Senator, I think you need to work on the logic just a little bit and maybe expand the fact base. Certainly think about please securing the border, Senator. And of course, Maine among the top states, Senator from Maine, top 10 states for opioid-related overdose deaths. Maine also with a crime rate of over 16 offenses for every 1,000 people. By the way, I might remind the senator that it is this president who declared opiates to be a national emergency in his campaign from almost the very first day. Well, despite the ever-growing field of 2020 Democratic hopefuls, a lot of hope, a lot of Democrats, the odds makers are heavily favoring President Trump to win re-election. President Trump is the 3-2 odds-on favorite. Kamala Harris is the leading Democrat at 8-1. That is what we call a big lead. Joining us tonight, former Reagan White House political director, Fox Business political analyst, Ed Rollins, a man who knows something about political odds, and the odds makers say.
But there's a whole lot of tread has to go down off this truck before we get to the.
You're not going to tell me it's early days, are you? You're not going to throw that one at me, too.
I'm not going to tell you it's early days. It was just one person, but when you got 24 candidates out there running, we're going to be so tired of this election by the time it comes. In the meantime, the president's got all kinds of stuff he has to do and do well, including this trade deal we're just talking about here, which is critical.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people right now are not paying attention to the fact this president is focused on 2020.
Right.
He always has to be focused on the United States, our national interests as president of this country, and he's done so better than any president in modern history. But this is about 2020 now, and he's got to prevail in these trade talks. Absolutely. The United States must prevail.
Absolutely.
He has to prevail on every single issue. The border wall, he has to prevail. He has to secure that border. The list goes on. And right now, at risk is the economy itself. And he's got this huge influence campaign run at him directly on the Chinese trade talks, trying to convince him and the American people that the outcome of the trade talks are all about assuring global market stability and price appreciation. It's pure nonsense.
There's two things that got him elected. One is he was viewed as a stronger leader than obviously Hillary, and he was. But secondly is that he basically had the strength and the convictions to move forward his agenda. And that's what we're dealing with right now.
Just to deal with the issue of these consecutive, and we're talking almost a half century of trade deficits and budget deficits in this country with an interregnum of 4 years.
People understand what trade deficits mean. What they do understand is when jobs basically get put us overseas and what have you. And this is a make or break deal. My sense today is we have to win this one. You're going to have to fight the Chinese all the way to make them live up to it.
You're not going to have to fight the Chinese. You're going to have to fight Mnuchin.
Right.
You're going to have to fight Kudlow, the Koch brothers. I mean, the list goes on.
I promise you, every one of the Chinese delegation that's here is exactly on the plan, on the page that they want. They know what they want. We're still basically arguing what we want. The president knows what he wants, but he's got to make sure his team knows the outcome is critical.
Your thoughts right now as we head into this new week coming up, a lot going on, whether it's Vietnam and North Korea and Kim Jong-un's summit.
There's so much on this agenda from the ones you just mentioned right there, which normally would take a whole month getting prepared for and talking about. This president never gets a break, never gets a breather, and he's just got to basically get his team together and move the ball forward.
And the great thing is, he never slows. He never slows. He never even pauses. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ed Rollins, up next, a decision made on how to handle an undecided House race in North Carolina just because they cheated. Isn't that the way it works? They cheated fair and square, right? Well, we'll tell you how they dealt with it in North Carolina the right way. More on the border crisis with Trump 2020 Communications Director Mark Lauder. He's coming up here next, but before we go, part of what the president has to deal with. Look at the national debt, $22 trillion. We're coming right back. Stay with us. Lauder, he's Director of Strategic Communication for the Trump 2020 campaign, just announced, and congratulations to you. Former Press Secretary to Vice President Mike Pence. Great to have you with us. These talks, let's start with these issues that are going to define, and I want to find out your thinking as to how much of the 2020 outcome. And these trade talks right now are, a lot of people are not paying attention to, but the business community, the influence campaign that's being run by the Chinese, Wall Street, etc., it's unrelenting, directed straight at the president. Your thoughts on its importance to the president's re-election?
I think it's very important because it will go to set our economy on an even stronger trajectory for a very long time to come. And Lou, presidents of both parties for many years, if not decades, have talked about fixing the trade problems with China, but none of them actually ever did it. Right. This is a president who said he was going to do it. He's going to do it. And the American workers, American companies are going to benefit. They're already benefiting from a strong economy. And when he can get this straightened out, I think the economy is going to be that much stronger, and it's going to be sustaining.
And the other issue that he ran on, a signature issue of the 2016 campaign, the wall. He is being contested, again, by basically the same host of opposition, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, the Koch brothers, whether it's a business roundtable, Wall Street, maybe even, for all I know, the Chinese as well, in building the wall. How important is it, in your judgment?
I think it's very important. I mean, this is a president who believes in keeping his promises. We've had so many presidents in the past say one thing and do another when they were in office. This is a president who believes in doing what he said he was going to do. The wall is one of those things. And even when you get beyond campaign promises, it's the right thing to do. The president understands about the drugs that are flowing across the border, the fentanyl, the heroin, the things that are poisoning so many of our neighborhoods, and then the crime. The president wants legal immigration, but he wants it to be legal immigration. And so this is all part and parcel to his plan to securing our country and making it a safer place for Americans and people who come here to work and can fulfill those jobs.
And as things stand now, as you well know, the Democrats, as the president points out, they're the party of crime, open borders, drugs, death and devastation. This is an extraordinary sound, a sentence from the border states. It's a Honduran migrant responding to the question whether or not he would be comfortable with Beto O'Rourke's suggestion that the walls be taken down between the United States and Mexico.
When you hear the Democrat candidates say, take the wall down, there should not be a wall, how do you feel about that?
Very comfortable. The wall is like not giving nobody a chance.
Not giving anybody a chance, Mark Lauder. Your thoughts?
No, and I mean, this again is just one of those reasons why the president is so right on this issue. He knows that walls work. He knows that, the reason why we have doors and walls around our homes is not because we hate the people on the outside. It's because we love the people on the inside. And by the way, most walls lead to doors. Use them. And we can do it legally. So this is an issue that the president is absolutely rock solid on. And to all the Democrats and folks who are throwing up these hissy fits over the national emergency, let's remember that President Clinton declared a national emergency to stop the import of blood diamonds from Sierra Leone. That actually didn't challenge our national security and make people at home safer. It was the right policy, but it was also a national emergency. Or stopping the investment in Angola. These are not things that threatened our homeland and our citizens. They were the right policy decisions. They were also national emergencies. The president's using the power of the office to protect the American people.
Mark Lauder, good to have you with us. And it was President Trump, after all, running, who was talking about building a wall, but with a big, beautiful gate and door. He acknowledged that from the very beginning and reinforces it now throughout. Mark, good to have you with us. Congratulations on your new position.
Thank you, Lou.
Appreciate it. Up next, how America views North Korea as President Trump prepares for his second summit with Kim Jong-un. We'll take that up with General Jack Keane and much more right after the break. Stay with us. Headlines tonight, actor Jussie Smollett released on bail today. He was charged with felony disorderly conduct for filing a false police report. Today's hearing came after Smollett lied to police about the fake hate crime attack that he conjured up last month. We're less than a week away from President Trump's second summit meeting with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. A new Fox News poll finds 46% of registered voters now approve of the president's policies on North Korea. Only 41% disapprove. Joining us tonight, retired four-star General, Fox Business Chief Strategic Analyst, General Jack Keane. General, good to see you. And this is interesting to see these numbers in the polling. The president building support for his view on bringing North Korea to the table and denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that's largely due, one, because they are talking. This is the second summit. And two, the testing, which had a whole air of crisis about it, with ballistic missiles flying over Japan, flying towards our other allies in the region, and threatening to use nuclear weapons against the United States. So that speech is gone, and so is that testing. I think that contributes to what's taken place here. But, and there is a big but, that North Korea has not given us yet anything tangible in terms of dismantling, disarming nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. Hopefully, we'll get some kind of a breakthrough here as a result of this summit. Remains to be seen.
Perhaps I infer incorrectly, but somewhat differently than you. I do see that the end of ballistic missile tests flying over Japan, as you point out, and other places. We've seen an absence of testing for almost a year and a half now as a result of the president's engagement with Kim Jong-un. That period of some 15, 16 months in which there's been no testing, no bellicosity per se, is in marked contrast to the 30 years that preceded this presidency, in which the North Koreans were full-time aggravants in global geopolitics.
Well, that's true. I mean, but Kim Jong-un is the leader among the three of them, grandfather, father, and now grandson, who truly accelerated the nuclear testing and ballistic missiles to a degree that his predecessors never had. But remember, at the first summit, the president and Kim Jong-un both agreed to denuclearize, and hopefully here there'll be a tangible step too. I think to do that, what our government would like to see is that there a timetable to denuclearize with an inventory of their assets to support it, and a commitment that there would be independent inspectors to verify that dismantling. Some kind of schedule to do that would certainly be a major tangible thing going forward.
I want to turn very quickly as we wrap up here. We're out of time, unfortunately, but Vladimir Putin said he'd be perfectly willing to bring back the Cuban Missile Crisis in 2019. What do you make of the statement, and what should be the U.S. response?
Well, I think it's Putin bluster again, psychologically trying to undermine the United States, as he's done before so successfully with Obama, threatening escalation, and as a result of that, no action taken. I believe what we should do here is what Ronald Reagan did in the 1980s when he deployed Pershing missiles to Europe. As a result of that, the Soviet Union came to the negotiating table, and we got the 1987 INF Treaty Agreement. The Russians have been violating that agreement. We should up our game in terms of countering that threat. We should not expose the American people to that threat or our allies. And I think as a result of that, there's a very good opportunity that negotiations will be restarted again to put together a new treaty, and this time hopefully to be able to pull China into it. So I think the president is absolutely on the right path here, and I think he understands what Putin is up to here.
General Jack Keane, always good to talk with you. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, good talking to you, Lou.
Up next, Andrew McCabe's convenient memory lapses, contradictions, conflict. My goodness. Who was on board with the deep state's plan to remove President Trump from office? And why in the world aren't these people in jail? We'll take it up with Jason Chaffetz here next. Stay with us. We'll be right back. On Wall Street, stocks closing lower. The Dow down 104 points. The S&P down 10. The Nasdaq lost 29. Volume on the big board, 3.5 billion shares. Crude oil down just over 0.5% to nearly $57 a barrel. Gold down 1.5%. Silver down nearly 2.5%. A reminder, listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast, on the Salem Radio Network. Andrew McCabe telling reporters today 2 cabinet members were thought to be on board with Rod Rosenstein's plan to invoke the 25th Amendment against President Trump, as if he could do that. When pressed on who those cabinet members were, McCabe said he couldn't very clearly remember who Rod was talking about. Well, it was just 2 names you would have thought. Well, never mind. And veteran journalist Laura Logan says she's become a target of the left-wing national media herself for calling out their obvious anti-conservative prejudice.
They can't take down the substance of what you're saying, right? They can't go after the things that matter. So they smear you personally. They go after your integrity.
Laura Logan, you've got to give her credit for making that statement. It's obvious to many of us, but for her to do so took some considerable bravery, and we commend her. Joining us tonight, Jason Chaffetz, former Republican congressman from Utah, former House Oversight Committee chairman, author, Fox Business contributor, great American. An attempted coup, and you've got Andrew McCabe contradicting himself, confessing at every turn on his book tour that he tried to unseat the President of the United States in a considerable conspiracy at the FBI and DOJ. Your reaction?
Well, I think the guy should actually be prosecuted. I don't think he should be on a book tour. If you go back and look at the February 2018 Inspector General report, 39 pages, it lays out the case, details 4 times where he lied to federal authorities, 3 times under oath. The Department of Justice has prosecuted everybody from Manafort to Stone to Flynn to, these people because they lied to federal authorities. The former acting director of the FBI lied to federal authorities. Why is he not prosecuted?
Why are none of these people being prosecuted? Of all of the people who were forced out, resigned, fired at the top of DOJ and principally the FBI, not one prosecution. Jason, what is going on? Why in the world is there not someone standing up? And do you think it will be William Barr to insist on investigation and prosecution? And I'm not talking about one of those endless year-by-year investigations the Justice Department and FBI become famous for. I'm talking about moving ahead smartly and getting to the facts.
Well, Attorney General Barr has the opportunity to be the most consequential Attorney General of our time. He really does. And the parallel that I see, Lou, is, on the Smollett case, you hate the disgusting effort of what this person put law enforcement through and the hate crime that he actually engaged in. But look at what the Chicago Police Department did. They investigated it. It took less than a month, and then they put some handcuffs on him, and now they're prosecuting him, all less than 30 days by doing some actual law enforcement work.
Yeah.
Why can't they do that in the federal government?
You know why? Because they're trying to cover up their crimes, their corruption. It's that straightforward, isn't it? I mean, they're burying the Obama administration's crimes against the Republic, the Constitution, and the nation, for crying out loud. Whether it's Benghazi, whether it is the Justice Department of Eric Holder that he politicized to the point of becoming simply a political arm of President Obama.
No, look, clearly the unthinkable happened, and that is Hillary Clinton lost the election, and suddenly their whole house of cards started to fold under them. And then when the president did the smart thing, which was, by the way, probably the most bipartisan thing in Washington, D.C., and that is the firing of James Comey, suddenly all the protective blankets that were on these people went away, and they were worried about being exposed. That's why they landed this counterpunch and trying to come up with an investigation to protect themselves. And then you see what's happening here. But these people, they have got to be prosecuted. The Inspector Generals did a fabulous job a year ago detailing why Mr. McCabe should be in jail.
I concur. You mentioned the Inspector General. Where the hell is he now? Mm-hmm. And why haven't we heard from him? And what has happened to John Hoover's special counsel with portfolio at large? I mean, good God Almighty, what is going on?
Well, look, I'm a huge fan of the Inspector General. He laid out that 500-page plus report. He did his job, but he's the one that got us all the information that we have now, Lou. That's good stuff. And he laid out a year ago the case against McCabe. Okay? Now, he has work to do on FISA abuse and the other things that happened there. What best I can tell, May, June is about what they're going to come up with, but it's going to be the most definitive report to come out and the most conclusive. From the Inspector General. He has the most credibility in town, and we got to really listen to what Michael Horowitz has to say on this.
And we're to hear from Robert Mueller, we are told soon. Do you think it will be in the next week or so?
I mean, there's an awful lot of people out there saying it could be tomorrow. It could be next week.
I will accept that.
Attorney General Barr has got to be able to review that. I mean, this has gone on far too long. It should have happened about 6 months ago, if not ever, because I don't know that they ever could justify it. But
well, they can't justify it. I love the fact James Clapper says it will be anticlimactic. Thank you very much, James Clapper, John Brennan, James Comey, the Three Stooges. Jason Chaffetz, always good to talk with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lou.
You bet. Up next, more on the ongoing trade talks with China, what the United States must do. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Who is Miss Universe, a beautiful young woman. Talk to me about finding that in her, because you said it wasn't really that easy for you to meet someone.
We met through Night to Shine, which is one of our initiatives. It's a worldwide prom for people with special needs, and her half-sister has severe special needs. She was kind of the matchmaker for us, and it's just, certain things that people think we need to have in common. Like, she was into pageants, I was into sports. Till this year, she had never been to a baseball or football game, but we didn't care. What was most important for us is the the deepest things, and our faith and our values and the way we want to treat people and the way we love our family, and I think that's what really drew us together.
You had dyslexia. You struggled with dyslexia.
Still do.
Still do. It's the way it works. What kind of impact did that have on your life, and what would you say to other young people who struggle with that?
It was very disappointing for a while when I was young. Like dang it, like this. I would work hard on it, but I just wouldn't get certain things. And then my mom took me to get tested. We found I had dyslexia, and then I met a tutor that helped me figure out how I learn best. I figured out I'm a kinesthetic learner. So I started to adjust. I started to do this with my playbooks. I started to do it with math. I started to do it with English. All these things of how I wanted to learn. By the time I got to the University of Florida, which is a very good academic school, I knew how I learned. I knew how I would want to study. I knew how I would want to practice. I knew how I could overcome these obstacles. That's also something I love sharing with young people, is that just because you have a setback, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be better for it. Honestly, that could be one of the biggest blessings in your life, because you have to learn how to overcome that, how to adapt. But when you do that, you're that much better for the long run.
I want to touch a little bit about football and about those obstacles and about Aaron Hernandez, who you played with in Florida, and tried to help to some extent. There's a moment that was captured on a mic between you and Tom Brady talking about trying to help him. Now that we know more about what was going on with him and the damage that his brain had sustained and the challenges that he had with his own sexuality and all of that, what do you think about him now looking back?
Well, I think that's a really deep, big question. Aaron was someone that we loved, that I loved, that we supported. We're all fighting different battles in our life. Aaron was someone that for 6 months in a row did a devotional with me and Coach Meyer. And he was someone that honestly probably went to the hospital to visit kids with me as much as any other teammate that I've ever had. And, there's all things that we're all dealing with, and you don't know what someone's going through. And that's why it's so important to be there to help people, because you don't know what's going on in the inside. And so I just know that was someone that we loved and cared for very deeply.
How did you feel about it when you heard what happened?
Well, the whole situation is hard, and it hurts, and it's a lot to take in, and I had been around him a good amount around that time, and it's hard.
So you started something new. You're producing a movie,
yes.
Run the Race. What is Run the Race, and why did you decide that this is a story that you wanted to tell?
I never had the goal of getting into the movie industry, and still really don't. I just had the goal of impacting people and encouraging people and inspiring young people, but ultimately about faith and about understanding there's a purpose and a plan for our lives and why we're here, and hopefully the people that see it will be able to walk away encouraged.